Today we're going to talk about the basic diminished chord. The diminished chord is one of the most misunderstood concepts in music, without considering half diminished and diminished seventh. It's a dissonant and tense chord that in certain contexts can provide satisfying relief and sophistication. In this lesson we're going to talk about two ways to play diminished, one starting on the E string and the other starting on the A string. We're also going to talk about the two contexts in which the chord can be applied, a modal context and a conventional songwriting context. The voicings we are going to use for our diminished chords are the most versatile. They're 3 notes, so they can be played alongside bar chords and double stops like power chords. For a chord to be considered diminished, it contains 3 intervals, the root, a minor third, and a flat fifth. Let's begin by learning the diminished chord starting on the E string. We're going to start with our root. That's going to be the 5th fret of the low E string with our pointer finger. Next, we're going to play the flat 5th. That's going to be the 6th fret of our A string, 3rd finger. Finally, we're going to play our minor 3rd, or minor 10th to be specific, on G, 5th fret, middle finger. Next, we're going to learn the A string version. We're going to start on the 5th fret. That's going to be our root of the A string. Next, we're going to play the 6th fret of D with our 3rd finger. That's again our flat 5th. Then we're going to play the B string 6th fret. And that's going to be our minor 3rd or minor 10th, if you again want to be specific. E string diminished. A string diminished. As unsettling and out of key as diminished sounds, there's actually one place in the major key and one place in the minor key where we can play diminished chords without any accidentals. I'm going to play every basic bar chord in the major key and in the minor key, also illustrating where diminished occurs. Major key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and now for our diminished 7, back to 1. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. So our 7 chord is diminished. Here's the minor key. 1, diminished 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then back to 1. So again, our diminished chord is on the 2 in the minor scale. 1, diminished 2. In the major scale, our diminished chord falls on 7. 7, 1. We just learned the traditional placement for diminished chords in the minor key and the major key. Now we're going to look at something a little more common in songwriting but rarely explained. In both the minor and major key, we can start diminished 1 fret up from the root of any major chord in key. This note is always going to be an accidental. To illustrate this, I'm going to play every chord in both the major key and minor key while pointing out where these diminished chords occur. We're going to start in the major key, 5th fret of the E string, which is the key of A. So chord number 1 is major. So based on that pattern, 1 half step up from the root of 1, since it's major, will support the diminished chord. So we have 1, and then we can do diminished right after 1. Then we have 2, which is minor, 3 is minor, 4 is major. So 4 is major, so that means at the root that means that one half step up from the root of 4 can start the diminished chord. So we have 4, and then the diminished chord right after 4. Then we have 5. So 5 is major. So the half step up from the root of 5, we can play diminished there. 6 is minor. 7 is traditionally diminished, like we talked about before. And then back to 1. So again, so it's 1, diminished, 2 chord, 3 chord, 4 chord, and then the diminished after 4, and then 5, and then the diminished chord after 5, then 6, then 7, which is traditionally diminished, and then back to 1. So without me talking over it, so again, one half step up from any major chord's root can be diminished. So that's going to be 1, 4, and 5. One half step up from those chords, you can play diminished. And you can also, of course, keep playing the traditional diminished chord on 7. So those are all 4 places in the major key where you can play diminished. Now I'm going to do the same thing in the minor key. 1 is minor, 2 is traditionally diminished, 3 is major. So what that means is after 3, I can go up 1 half step and create the diminished chord there. Then I go on to 4, which is minor, 5, minor. Now 6 is major. So that means 1 half step up from the root of 6 can be diminished. 7 is major, so the same thing there. 1 half step up from 7 is diminished. And then we're back to 1. So here it is without me talking over it. So after chords 3, 6, and 7, which are all the major parts of the minor scale, 1 half step up from the root of those chords, we can apply a diminished chord. In the minor key, the 4 diminished chords occur on 2, which is the traditional placement, and then 1 half step up from the root of 3, 6, and 7 are also diminished. I'm going to play a major chord progression using the traditional 7 diminished. I'm going to play a minor chord progression using the traditional 2 diminished. I'm going to play a major progression, but this time 1 half step up from the root of my 5 chord, I'm going to play diminished. So, 1 half step up from my 5 chord, I played diminished before going to my 6 chord. So 1, 5, then I did my half step up from the root of a major chord, which was 5, and applied diminished before going to my 6 chord. I'm going to play a minor progression, but this time 1 half step up from the root of my 3 chord, I'm going to play diminished before ending on the 4 chord. So since 3 was major, I was able to go 1 half step up or 1 fret up and play diminished before going to my next chord in the progression, which was 4. So you can do this after any major chord. I could have done it if I went to 7. So for example, 1, 3, 7. The bottom line with the conventional placement is that you can do it 1/2 step up from any major chord. So to recap all the diminished chords in both the major and minor key, I'm going to play all the bar chords and go over where all the diminished chords occur. So in the major scale, we have 1. Since 1 is major, 1/2 step up from the root, I can play diminished. 2 is minor. 3 is minor. 4 is major. So since 4 is major, 1/2 step up from the root, I can create diminished from there. So we get 4, diminished after 4. Then we get 5. And then since 5 is major, 1/2 step up from the root, I can play diminished. And then go to 6, which is minor. And 7 is the traditional diminished placement for that key. And then back to 1. Every chord in the major key. In the minor key, we get 1 is minor, 2 is the traditional placement, 3 is major. Since 3 is major, 1/2 step up can be diminished. Then we get 4 is minor, so is 5, 6. Since 6 is major, 1/2 step up can be diminished. Then we get 7. Since 7 is major, 1/2 step up can be diminished. Then minor, 1. Every diminished chord in both keys.
Put your hands up, put 'em up. Put your hands up, put 'em up.